Right now, you are carrying an emergency food supply on your own body. You can't see it, but it is there, packed away, waiting, energy stored against a disaster that, for you, will almost certainly never come. And the reason it exists, the reason your body hoards energy the way it does, the reason you can crave sweet and fatty things so intensely that you'll reach for them even when you're already full, is that for almost the entire human story, the most dangerous and predictable threat your ancestors faced was not a predator. It was not a rival tribe. It was not even the cold. Exactly. It was an empty stomach. The food ran out constantly, sometimes catastrophically. And here is a fact worth sitting with for a moment. Every single one of your ancestors survived it. Everyone, all the way back in an unbroken chain. Because if even one of them had starved before passing life on, you would simply not be here. So the question for today is how? When the hunt failed, when the plants died back, when the cold came and the land went silent and the stored food was gone, what did ancient humans actually do to keep from starving? The answer is a survival masterclass tens of thousands of years deep, and it is the reason your body works the exact, strange, frustrating, brilliant way it does today. So stick with me. First, let's correct the picture because most of us have the dangers of prehistoric life completely ranked wrong. When we imagine what was most likely to kill an ancient human, we picture the dramatic stuff, the lion in the grass, the rival group over the hill, the mammoth hunt gone wrong, the big, cinematic Hollywood dangers, and those were real. But they were not the main event. They were rare, sharp shocks against a much quieter, much more relentless background threat. That background threat was hunger, not the skipped lunch, slightly cranky hunger you and I know, real hunger. The prolonged, grinding kind that comes when the food genuinely runs out and the body, having nothing else, begins to consume itself. For most humans through most of history, scarcity was a regular visitor. It came with the seasons, as predictable as the cold and as patient as time. The lion might get you once. Hunger came for everyone every year, which means that the central defining problem of human existence, the thing we were truly shaped by, was not how to win a fight. It was how to not starve. And our ancestors became absolute masters of it. They attacked the problem from every direction at once, with a layered set of strategies so effective that we are all here as a result. Let's start with the most obvious one. When you have food now and you know lean times are coming, you save some. This sounds simple, but it was a profound technological achievement because food rots. Nature is full of things trying to eat your food before you can. Bacteria, mold, insects, scavengers. So ancient humans became brilliant at the one thing that beats decay, preservation. They learned to dry meat and fish in the sun and wind until it could last for months. They learned to smoke it over fire, which both dried it and coated it in natural preservatives. In cold climates, they used the frozen ground itself as a freezer, caching meat in the permafrost. They rendered fat, which stores enormous energy and keeps well. They dried fruits and roots. Some groups later learned to ferment foods, turning the very process of controlled spoilage into a way to make food last and even become more nutritious. And some of their preservation methods were so good we still use them essentially unchanged. Consider the practice, found among various peoples, of pounding dried meat together with rendered fat and sometimes dried berries into a dense, energy-rich food that could last for a very long time and be carried easily. It is one of the most efficient survival foods ever devised, compact, durable, packed with calories, and it was the product of careful, hard-won knowledge about how to cheat decay. Other groups dug deep storage pits, lining them, and using the cool, stable temperature of the earth to keep roots, grains, and other foods through the lean months. Archaeologists find these storage features at ancient sites, the silent infrastructure of people who were thinking always about the hungry season ahead. A cache of preserved food was a message sent from your well-fed self to your starving future self. It said, "I thought of you. I knew you were coming here." Every dried fish on a rack, every store of nuts buried against the winter was an act of foresight, a human being reaching across time to keep themselves and their group alive through the empty season. That ability to plan for a hunger you can't yet feel is one of the quiet superpowers of the human mind. Most animals cannot do it. A squirrel caches nuts on instinct, but it does not lie awake imagining February. Or ancestors could see the empty season coming from months away and prepare for a suffering they were not yet feeling. That foresight saved them again and again. But storage only gets you so far. Sometimes the stores ran out anyway, and the lean season dragged on. So our ancestors had a second strategy, and it lived inside their heads. Knowledge and experienced forager carried, in memory, an astonishingly deep encyclopedia of their landscape, and critically, that encyclopedia included the backup plan. The famine foods because in good times, you eat the good stuff, the rich meat, the sweet fruit, the easy calories. But every group also knew about the foods you turn to when the good stuff is gone. The tough, the bitter, the bland, the labor-intensive, roots you had to dig deep for and process for hours to make edible, bark and cambium, the inner layer of certain trees, shellfish and small creatures that weren't worth the effort in good times but became lifesavers in bad ones. The bitter plants, the hard seeds, the things that filled a belly even if they didn't delight it. This knowledge of the fallback foods was in a very real sense a survival library passed down across generations, knowing that when everything else failed, you could still dig those roots, scrape that bark, crack those bones for the marrow inside. That knowledge was the difference between life and death. And it had to be taught, remembered, and kept alive across hundreds of years by people who had no writing, only memory and story and the patient teaching of elders who had survived the last bad winter, and the one before that. There was another piece of this too, and it is one of the great advantages humans have always had. We will eat almost anything. Unlike a specialist animal, a panda tied to bamboo, a koala to eucalyptus, humans are the ultimate generalists. Meat, fish, fruit, roots, nuts, seeds, insects, eggs, shellfish, leaves, fungi. This astonishingly broad diet was itself a famine strategy. When one food source collapsed, our ancestors could pivot to another and another. The flexibility was the safety net. A group that could only eat one thing would die the moment that thing failed. A group that could eat 100 things could almost always find something. And when a whole region gave out, humans had a final powerful option that rooted plants and slow animals do not. They could move. Mobility was survival. Ancient human groups often followed the seasons across the landscape to the river when the fish ran, to the high ground when certain plants ripened, to the plains when the herds migrated through. This wasn't aimless wandering, it was a finely tuned seasonal round, a yearly circuit timed to be in the right place exactly when each place had something to offer. When the food ran out here, you knew where it would be appearing there, and you went. The whole rhythm of life was built around staying one step ahead of scarcity, reading the land and the seasons like a schedule of where the next meal would come from. And that points to the third strategy, which was maybe the most powerful of all. Because the most important thing ancient humans did when the food ran out wasn't a technique at all. It was each other. Here is the deep logic. The single most important feature of food in the wild is that it is unpredictable and unevenly distributed. On any given day, one hunter gets lucky and brings down a large animal, far more meat than their own family could ever eat before it's spoiled. Another hunter, just as skilled, comes back with nothing tomorrow. Their luck might reverse. So what do you do with a windfall you can't possibly finish? You share it. You give it away widely to everyone in the group, and this looks like generosity, and it is. But underneath, it is something even cleverer. It is insurance, because the day you share your kill with the hunter who failed, you are not just feeding them, you are storing a debt, you are banking goodwill. And when your luck turns, as it always eventually does, and you come back empty-handed, they will share with you. The meat you cannot store in your body or in a cache, you store in your relationships. Anthropologists who study modern hunter-gatherers see this everywhere. Food sharing in these groups is often intense, expected, almost sacred. A successful hunter doesn't get to hoard. The meat flows out across the whole community, and in return, the hunter is woven into a web of obligation that will feed them when they fail. In many such groups, there are even customs that actively prevent a good hunter from getting too proud or possessive about their kill. The meat is treated as belonging to everyone, sometimes distributed by someone other than the hunter himself, precisely so that no individual can turn food into power over others. The sharing is protected by culture, because the sharing is what keeps everyone alive. This turns a group of individuals, each vulnerable to a single run of bad luck, into a single organism that is far harder to starve. Your neighbor's full belly today is your own insurance policy tomorrow. The group itself becomes a kind of living storehouse, smoothing out the brutal randomness of the hunt across many bodies and many days. The very thing we consider one of the highest human virtues, generosity, sharing food with others, may have been forged in the furnace of starvation as the single most effective technology our ancestors ever found for surviving the empty season. We learned to be generous because in a world of unpredictable hunger, generosity is what kept everyone alive. So that is what they did out in the world. Stored food, knew the fallbacks, shared the wealth. But there is one more layer to this story, and it is the one you're carrying with you right now. Because while ancient humans were solving the hunger problem with technology and knowledge and society, evolution was solving it inside their bodies, and those solutions are still running in yours. Let's talk about the body you're sitting in. When food was abundant, a successful hunt, a season of ripe fruit, a windfall, your ancestors didn't eat carefully and save the rest for later inside themselves. They couldn't. There were no refrigerators in the body. So evolution did the next best thing. It built a body that, when food was plentiful, would eat eagerly and store the surplus as fat. Fat is the body's own preserved cash. It is energy packed away against the lean times to come. The drive to eat richly when food is available, to not stop at just enough, was not a flaw. In a feast or famine world, it was a life-saving feature. The ancestor who ate eagerly in the good times and built up a reserve was the ancestor who survived the winter. The one who ate daintily and stored nothing was not. This is also why we crave the things we crave. Sugar signals quick, precious energy, rare and valuable in the wild, found in ripe fruit and honey that were worth seeking out and gorging on while they lasted. Fat is the densest energy source there is, the most calories per bite, exactly what you'd want to prioritize when every calorie might be your last, for a while. Salt was scarce and essential. So your brain evolved to find these things intensely, almost irresistibly rewarding, to drive you toward them, to make you want more. Those cravings are not your weakness. They are ancient survival instincts, finely tuned for a world where finding a tree heavy with ripe fruit was a stroke of rare fortune you'd be a fool not to seize. And the body had a second trick, just as important. It learned to run on its reserves. When food genuinely runs out, the human body doesn't simply shut down. It switches fuel sources. After the immediately available energy is used up, the body begins breaking down its stored fat, converting it into a form the brain and muscles can burn. This is a remarkable piece of metabolic engineering, the ability to smoothly transition from running on the food you just ate to running on the food you stored months ago. It is precisely what let our ancestors keep thinking, moving, hunting, and foraging even deep into a lean season, when there was nothing in the stomach but the body still had reserves to draw on. The machinery that releases your stored energy in times of scarcity is one of the oldest and most reliable survival systems you own, and it is humming away inside you at this very moment. Some scientists have gone further and propose that humans may have been specifically shaped by this feast and famine cycle to be especially good at storing energy, an idea sometimes called the thrifty gene hypothesis. The notion that genes which were brilliant at hoarding calories in a scarce world became a liability in a world of plenty. I want to be honest with you, this particular idea is debated, and the full picture is almost certainly more complicated than any single tidy hypothesis. But the basic, uncontroversial truth underneath it is solid as bedrock. Our bodies were built by scarcity. They are exquisitely good at surviving a world where food runs out, because for almost all of human history it did. And here is where we arrive at the part nobody tells you. The part that changes how you see your own body. For hundreds of thousands of years, all of this worked perfectly. The eager eating, the fat storage, the powerful cravings, the feasting when food was plenty. It was a flawless system, beautifully matched to a world of scarcity and unpredictability. It kept your ancestors alive through every empty season, in an unbroken chain stretching back further than we can see. And then, in the blink of an evolutionary eye, just the last few generations, a sliver of time so thin it barely registers against the vast depth of human history, the world flipped. For a large part of humanity, for the first time ever, food stopped running out. It became abundant, constant, available at every hour, engineered to be as sweet and fatty and irresistible as possible, on every corner and in every cupboard. But your body doesn't know that. Your body is still running the ancient program. It is still bracing for a famine that no longer comes. It still craves the sugar and the fat with all the urgency of an ancestor who might not eat again for days. It still eagerly stores the surplus, faithfully packing away an emergency supply for an emergency that will never arrive. The system that was your ancestors' greatest survival tool now operates in a world it was never designed for. So if you have ever felt at war with your own appetite, if you've ever wondered why it is so hard to resist the very foods that seem to work against you, why your body clings to what it stores, why the cravings feel so much stronger than your willpower, here's the truth, and I want you to hear it kindly. There is nothing wrong with you. You are not weak. You are a superbly engineered famine survival machine running flawlessly in a world that no longer has any famines. Your body is doing exactly what kept every one of your ancestors alive. It is just doing it in a time it was never built for. The mismatch isn't a personal failing. It is a piece of deep history written into your flesh. So let's go all the way back to that hungry group at the end of the long winter, weeks into the empty season, moving slowly, conserving what little they had. What did they do when the food ran out? They drew on everything, the preserved caches their past selves had left them, the deep knowledge of the bitter fallback foods that could keep a body going, the web of sharing that meant no one starved alone while another had plenty. And underneath it all, the patient, brilliant machinery of their own bodies, releasing the energy they'd banked as fat in the days of plenty, stretching every reserve, holding on. And they made it. They survived to the spring, to the returning herds, to the first green shoots. They always did, at least long enough. You are the proof. We are the descendants of the ones who got through the empty season. Every one of us is the end of an unbroken chain of survivors who faced down starvation and won over and over for longer than our species has even been fully itself. That chain runs right up to you. The hunger they conquered is the reason your body is the way it is. Their survival is, quite literally, your inheritance stored in your cravings, your reserves, the very way you eat. You carry them with you every single day in the most physical way imaginable. So here is my question for you, and I really do want to know. The next time you feel that pull toward the sweet or the rich, that craving that seems to come from somewhere deeper than reason, does it change anything to know you're feeling the echo of an ancient hunger, the survival instinct of every ancestor who ever made it through a winter that should have killed them? Let me know in the comments. I read them, and your answers to questions like this are always the best part. Until then, take care of yourselves and of each other, and I'll see you soon.